if I'm storing all my memories there, then I'm also able to store like algorithms there that can help me filter through those memories. And then I'm also able to, just insert books into my memory as I see fit, and different training documents. And now I could access those. There's day one where we plug into, say, a neural interface. Then there's day two and day three and day four as we slowly start to store more information there, access more information there. And the question becomes, like, at what point are we a cybersapien instead of a homo sapien?
And welcome back to Swift Start Go, the podcast where we talk all things AI, tech, and sometimes some crazy shenanigans that you may have never even heard of. I'm your host, Carolyn Swift Holden, the Swift Start Go, and today I am so excited to bring my dear friend here, Brian Pitts. Now, Brian gave me something to say. And I gotta say it here. So Brian here is an entrepreneur, engineer, and futurist who is currently building Communiful, the in-person social network for professionals. Welcome, Brian.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me on today, Carolyn. I definitely appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I'm so glad you're here. And now, Brian, in this description that you sent me, did you tell me to describe Communiful as the in-person social network?
So yeah, when I sent it to you, I was like, this is like the type of thing you might say in an intro.
I see. This wasn't like the explicit description.
We got
exactly
the explicit description, which perhaps maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, I don't know. But
okay.
It was really an example of how
I see. Okay. So, but in that case, like in the case of this being like the in-person social network,
sure.
Who do you think is going to play you in the Aaron Sorkin movie version of the in-person social network? Do you think you're Andrew Garfield or Justin Timberlake or Jesse Eisenberg? What do you think?
Oh, no. I have no idea. Yeah, that's a great question.
You have no idea?
I mean...
Okay. Well, the good news for you is we got you your very own movie poster. So, as you can see here, it's you don't get to... for our audience who's only listening and not watching, you don't get to 500 local startup events without becoming Minnesota Nice.
That's so good.
This is for you. You get to keep this,
Incredible.
And this is your surprise.
I love that you actually went out and had this made. This is amazing. Yeah, I'm hanging this on my wall
Here you
for
go.
sure.
So thank you for coming on my show.
That's so funny.
Well, it was just like you sent that, and I was
creative.
immediately like, oh, like the social network. And
I feel like there's even like a filter on it that kind of looks like the there's like the, I don't know, they did the photos for the social network. They have like a, I don't know.
I actually made it with AI.
Did
Speaking
you?
of filters, so what I did was I took your your LinkedIn photo, and I asked ChatGPT, hey, can you create an image of this person as if it was like a poster, like the movie The Social Network. And it made one, but it created a different tagline that I didn't like, but the image was like spot on, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. And then I was like, okay, change the text, and it couldn't recreate it. And I was so annoyed. I got really mad at it. So eventually I was like, can you just like create the background image again, and I'll figure out the text. And so I did that, and then I added the text in
it's
Canva.
Good. It was good. Yeah,
but I thought that was a good time.
A+ work for sure.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, now, Brian, in addition to always sending me your weekly tips and tricks on how to improve this podcast, low-key, guys, Brian here is my most engaged.
I'm a super fan, literally.
Most active super fan. He's always sending me like feedback on all of my episodes, being like, hey, next time, like you should try to make sure to get to the point like way faster. and I appreciate that because I think I only have one other friend who's in Spain who like sends me notes and things as well. And so I always get so excited when you send me all of your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm such a super fan that I opened one of your messages like, 120 times or something. Like, it was like, it's okay.
So for those of you who don't know, apparently Substack does this thing where if you send a note or like have like an email correspondence afterwards, it like adds the amount of views that that person had.
Yeah, but through the whole thread, so it like multiplies it by like 6 or 10 or whatever, however many messages are in the thread.
And so for one of my episodes, for one of my email newsletters, it said that I got like over 200 views, which has like never happened before. And then when you look like who opened it that many times. It said that you opened it. I think it said 119 times.
Yeah,
I think that was the exact number.
I mean, I'm a super fan. I can't deny it.
Oh my gosh. Well, in addition to always providing me with your fantastic feedback and being a super fan of the show, the two of us also spend a lot of time talking about AI and how AI is going to change things. Yeah. So to get to the point right away, as per your feedback, one of the things we've talked about is how AI is effectively eroding software moats.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate on what this means, especially for somebody who's not necessarily in the space, who has no idea what on earth a software moat is,
sure.
And how you think AI is going to change things?
Yeah. So a software moat is basically this idea that like you invest all this time into building software, right?
Yeah.
And like I think that kind of looks like you have something like Salesforce or ServiceNow. These are companies that were founded in like 1999, 2004, and they have like 20 years of just like 1,000 engineers just building software and building software and building software. And so if you're a startup and you're trying to compete with someone like that, like what do you do?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is you have to hire 1,000 people and build code for 20 years.
Yeah.
And otherwise you have to sort of like go into a small niche and try to expand from there. But, you know, we're kind of entering into this era where you can just spin up a server and it just starts writing code for you. And maybe this happens in the next couple of years where we're actually able to do that. And so the idea of a software moat is going away. The idea that like 20 years of 1,000 engineers matters. And because like when you actually look at some of these tools right now, it's like there's like Windsurf, which is I think probably one of the most up and coming tools in the development space. You basically just write a message like you're writing to ChatGPT, and it writes, you know, 1,000 lines of code across multiple files. And as we continue to progress, we're going to start seeing that as just like a project management tool. And so the software moat is like this kind of dying concept, because as people are able to write code more easily, you actually end up in this position where it becomes commoditized.
Yeah.
It's not this really valuable thing that you have to spend $180,000 or something on a person to work 40 hours a week. It's like you could spend like $20 and you'll basically accomplish the same thing. So yeah, I think when we start looking at like, look at this.
Well, I know whenever I am thinking about software moats, one of the things that I think about is social media and how you know Facebook has had such a monopoly on the space for such a long time, right? And how nobody has really wanted to or been able to compete, and then these companies are able to buy out all of their competitors, or you know maybe take advantage of their monopolistic behavior, basically.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Facebook's kind of interesting because they have another thing going for them, which is like network effects, which is like as you get people onto a platform, the more people that are there, the harder it is to replace them, or the harder it is to compete with that company. And so like, you know, when essentially with software moats, like it really is just like a labor moat. Like it's just time and energy of workers. And so, you know, like a good example of this, like when you look out into like previous time periods, is what happened with like CNC machining, right? Like I think machining was this like really laborious kind of handcrafted profession for the better part of you know, a couple hundred years really. And you know, we created CNC machining, I think in like the 1950s, but it really became popularized in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And once that happens, you take, you know, hundreds of machinists, and one person could basically achieve the same thing with a machine that's essentially automated. But we take all these parts and it drives the price down, right? So like machining used to be very expensive. Now you could get something made for like 10 cents a part or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you start to see then this trend around things moving over to like the more complex machining tasks end up being done on these CNC machines. And then we start outsourcing manufacturing to other places where the labor is cheaper around the world. And I think that we're going to see a similar parallel with the stuff that's happening in software development because it's becoming a commodity. We'll start to see like, oh, this isn't really important, like as having someone, spending 100, it's not going to be important to have important enough to have someone getting paid $180,000 a year. You're going to start to look to like, okay, well, how can we reduce the cost of this? If someone's just going to like read through the code and determine whether or not it's doing what we expect it to do, like what is the value of that role? And so all of this stuff is basically shifting toward full automation, and then basically the tasks that we can't automate, like it's going to drive the price of those tasks way down, because we're going to be able to put that labor in other places in the world where the cost of that labor is cheaper.
Yeah, that's really wild.
Yeah. Definitely. But it also opens up new opportunities, right? I think like as with any technological shift, like we're not doing those tasks anymore, but we're doing other tasks, and there's a lot of like other non-deterministic creative tasks, because like programming, the reason that we could do this with software is because it's like deterministic. When you write something, you could look at the other side and you could say, does this do what I expect it to do? And there's a direct sort of answer, yes or no, and we could test and prove that answer. Versus creative work, which is non-deterministic, like it's preference based. It's like, well, this group might like this better and that group might like that better, and that opens up the door for us to have a lot more creativity in the work that we do. So it's like, in some ways, it's like people are scared about this. They're afraid of this idea that we're gonna lose all these engineering jobs and so on. But much the way that manufacturing was sort of the middle class opportunity from say the 1920s or something through the 1980s and 90s, then software engineering became like that solidly middle class opportunity. A new one is going to open up with these tools.
Yeah. And what I keep telling anybody who will listen, especially you, since you watch all of my read all of my content all the time, is that what this does is it makes it so that we don't only have these giant organizations who are hiring people. We're going to have way more companies and way more opportunities for people to do work that makes a bigger impact.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of having a handful of these super gigantic companies, we're going to be having a lot more smaller companies who are able to make a much bigger impact. And it just makes it so much easier to build a business in general, because you don't need nearly as many people. Yeah,
100%. And I think I think we're gonna see two trends like with this stuff, right? I think like on the one side of the coin is like the one person $1 billion company, and on the other side of the coin is just this Cambrian explosion of startups, because now you don't need to like seek out that CTO, and this was this really like coveted position in startups where you have a salesperson and they're like, I have this idea for this product, but I can't build it, and then you have to go out and find an engineer, but engineers are kind of rare, and they're getting paid really well, and they don't necessarily want to leave their jobs to just go dive into a startup. And so it made it really hard to start software companies for a long time. But once you have this sort of commoditization of software, now anyone could start a software company. And we're really seeing this. I mean, I've seen, I was talking to someone who's starting an AI company that works at an auto shop. And that's fascinating to me, right? Because he has no background in programming, no background in anything computer related for the most part, but he's essentially writing software with these tools. And so that's like, on the one side, there's all of these companies that are going to spring up in the software space, and they're probably going to be, in these niches, and it's going to be like a small business kind of an area where small business really thrives. But then on the other side, you have like this one person $1 billion company idea, which is like, well, if you have all this automation and all of these, all of these agents that you're able to orchestrate to accomplish these tasks, well, then you can really accomplish so much more. But and this has been an idea that has really taken to the mainstream, that like we're sort of reducing labor forces, and you sort of take it out to the extreme, and you sort of just imagine this one person orchestrating this giant business, which I think is really cool as a concept. But I do think there's limitations to it still, right? It's like we have we have these issues around, like, trust, for instance, right? It's like, okay, well, we have one person that's orchestrating this entire thing. Well, now they still have to sell stuff. Well, like, the person on the other end, do they trust your agent, or do they want to talk to a person? Like, at what point do we reach like that cultural inflection point where we start to trust these things? Because it's one thing for technology to be possible, and it's a totally different thing for our sort of like culture to accept that technology. And you think about like glass holes as the prime example of this, right? Like, you roll back to 2013, and we actually had like a functional prototype of augmented reality, but the culture didn't really allow for it to take place, because people would be wearing these Google glasses in a bar, and people would come and like rip them off their face and throw them on the ground because they were like afraid that they were being recorded. I mean, fast forward 10 years and look at the cultural transformation.
And now Ray-Bans and Facebook
and just everyone, sitting with their phone recording everything. I mean, you're in so many videos that you don't even realize you're in, I'm sure. And I think that's like that's that cultural element where, like, just because the technology is possible doesn't mean that we're going to accept the technology. And so definitely on the sales side with these like one-person billion-dollar companies, it's going to be a challenge at first, right? Because like you can't scale your time, and on the other side of the table, are people going to trust your agent to be representing you properly? Like, and is it going to have all the information and context and all of these things? And it poses like another problem, because like, how much context can a person carry in their mind? And so like, if you're orchestrating across sales and marketing and all these things, but then you have like a competitor that has a two-person billion-dollar company, are they going to be able to subdivide the work up in a way where they could manage the context better and then outcompete you? And I would argue that probably yes, because like, if I just focus on marketing and you just focus on AI, well, now we've divided up the workload in a way that like, we could still communicate efficiently, but we could also keep more context in our mind and expand the sort of maybe like decision-making surface area that we're able to operate on. And so I think context is a big issue for these one-person billion-dollar companies, because a two-person company and a three-person company and a five-person company, like you almost like, there's this window in time where there's like this arbitrage opportunity where you could do this, but that arbitrage opportunity goes away, because arbitrage is essentially like leveraging an asymmetry in a market. So like, an asymmetry being like, I'm using AI tooling and you're not, and therefore I could accomplish 100 times more. But as other companies start to leverage those AI tools as well, like, that arbitrage opportunity goes away. It's no longer an asymmetry. And so that's like another issue with this idea, is you sort of end up with just like these limitations in like how you're able to use the tool versus how someone else is able to use the tool, because we sort of end up just operating them in the same way, and now it's no longer an opportunity. So then it does become about like, how much work can I get done in a day? And so there's like, the world looks very different over the next like 5 years, where like the market is unstable and there's all these like crazy opportunities. But like, as we like hit some sort of point where things stabilize, like, business is business, and we kind of go back to this like, well,
old school way of building and stuff.
Like, how can I be more efficient than your team? How could I be better than your team? And a lot of times that is adding additional people to the pie, because like, one person can only do so much.
And that's one of the things is like, I do think the conversation in the AI community about whether or not we are going to have a single person running $1 billion business, like, I do think it's going to happen. I don't know that that's like, as like a former founder, I don't know if it's a good idea for your mental health to have that be a long-term strategy. And so I do think there is value in at least having, at a bare minimum, a handful of team members who can help you out, because like, building a business is hard.
Totally.
And like, while I do think it is possible, is it like the best idea? You kind of worry about like the control, like someone who's like a real control freak trying to build one of these businesses. And then like getting to like a severe point of burnout, but like, because they've been able to do it independently for so long, like just unwilling to allow anybody else to come in to like help them.
Yeah,
right?
totally. And like, I mean, you even see this with like bootstrap companies. They're like a really good parallel to bootstrap companies. It's like, how many like bootstrap companies achieved like $1 billion outcome?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a small number. It's a countable number. I mean, like the most I guess prominent one is MailChimp, and I think they had like, you know, they sold to Intuit for I think like 10 or $14 billion or something like that. And you know, they didn't raise any outside investment the entire time. I think they operated for, you know, a couple decades before they achieved that outcome.
Yeah.
But it's a countable number of companies that achieve that. I think it's probably gonna be the same thing here, right? It's like you're such an outlier. Like, is it possible? Yes. But like, is it really hard? Like, also yes, because just like with VC, you get more money and that gives you a chance to run more experiments. And when you have a chance to run more experiments, well, you know, you get to figure out more what is working and what isn't. And so I think that same thing applies here. It's like, can you do it? Yes, maybe. Is it going to be common? Probably not. Is it a good idea? Also, yeah.
Is it a good idea?
it's gonna be a struggle for you. But yeah, I think it's a cool area, I think. But I definitely think you're right. Like, we're gonna see so many businesses spring up because now this once you know, inaccessible tool, you know, software development is accessible to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we are going to be right back after the break. We'll see you in a moment. This show has been brought to you by Cirrus North. Does your organization need a better partner for cloud, DevOps, security, and compliance? Cirrus North is a team of software professionals with a passion for cloud solutions, DevOps, automation, Kubernetes, and streamlining complex business problems. They are 100% US-based in Minnesota and Chicago, have deep experience supporting mission-critical technology operations in highly regulated environments, and have delivered success for startups and for companies on the Fortune 5. Interested? Reach out to the team at cirrusnorth.io. That's cirrusnorth.io. Thanks, Cirrus North. And welcome back, everybody. So we just left off talking about founders of startups potentially building billion-dollar businesses and whether or not that was a good idea. But I'm curious, what do you think is the future for founders building in the AI space moving forward, other than that, or in addition to that?
Yeah. I think one of the most important things if you're building anything right now is just know the tools, right? I think we have all of these new tools coming out every day. There's new models coming out. There's, you know, these image generation products and code generation products and so on. And I think you really just have to become an expert at learning new tooling, because one day it's the new hot thing and the next day it barely even accomplishes something that's useful. Because our idea of what is useful is like the goalpost is changing so fast.
Yeah.
And so like there's this really like interesting parallel to what's happening now and what was happening during like the first industrial revolution.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I think if you look back at like the 1812 area and like the Luddite movement.
Yeah, the Luddites are fascinating.
Totally fascinating. Yeah. There's this book called, I think it's called The Blood in the Machine. And it's all about this Luddite movement. And it's just fascinating because there's this group of people, the Luddites, that they had this like firmly middle class job. They worked 4 days a week. They took like 2 months off. Well, they weren't the Luddites then, they were the weavers. Yeah. And so they were basically these weavers in Britain at the time. And it was just a great job. And one of the issues is one of the first areas that machines started to really become useful was in the textile industry.
Right, and making clothes, all of those big factories and machines.
Yeah, exactly. And at the time, you know, the average person maybe had like one outfit and then like their Sunday best or something like that. And these machines come in and all of a sudden, you know, people have like 6 outfits because they could afford them, and maybe the quality of the product isn't as good, but that didn't matter because it's like it's nicer to be able to have 2 Sunday bests, you know? And so I think that it's like the same thing happening right now. It's like we might think like, hey, these tools, they're not as good as if I did this by hand, or if I, you know, had the world's best artist come in and make this image instead of you know, having AI generate it. But the fact that it becomes so much more accessible opens up so much opportunity, where now instead of just having like one really, really, really great ad, you might be able to have like 10 like pretty good ads. And that might be what matters, because like being able to change things up and get new stuff in front of people is actually more valuable. So yeah, I think the Luddites and the Weavers kind of had a sad ending, because I think at that time it was really hard to change careers, and it was just a very different time period. But today it's so easy to learn these things, and so I think the most important advice that I could give is just like learn the technologies, right? Like don't become a modern day Luddite and try to hold on to these things that maybe we've done previously that like we have maybe even really strong talent in. It's like adopt the new thing and then apply that talent that you have to the new tools, because that's where you're going to find the most success. And there's a lot of tools, so you have to constantly be learning.
And this conversation is one that I feel like the two of us have like every couple of weeks, where we end up like having an email exchange where I'm like, yeah, and this is like what I'm hearing from other people, because I have so many friends who are artists or who are educators or who are in general just like anti-AI, and I'm noticing like not the fever pitch maybe, but like the sentiment is getting more and more negative. But at the same time, a lot of the assumptions from this community, usually they are factually accurate of, oh, AI uses a lot of energy and I don't feel comfortable using it because I don't want to harm the environment. Or there are things like, I'm really concerned about copyright law. And it's like, well, from my perspective, the copyright law situation is going to be resolved by the courts at some point. And we might want to participate in some protests. We might want to reach out to our senators. But that to me isn't, because eventually we're going to figure this out, and there will be ways to figure out how people are going to be compensated from data that was stolen, right? But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't use the tools or that these tools are going away, because they're not. And so from my perspective, it's like, okay, like we have a copyright situation here, but that to me isn't a big enough reason to not use the tools. And then the energy thing, I actually want to write about it in the newsletter sometime soon, because I need to do way more research on it. I know that like the vast majority of energy usage when it comes to AI tends to be from like the actual training, and not from like a single individual who is using these tools. So that and the fact that like things are aggressively getting better like every couple of months, where we're able, like with DeepSeek and whatnot, like we are able to process that much more compute with like a lot, or I guess with less compute. I don't know. This is why I need to do research on it. I need to be, like, I know it's getting better, but I don't know all the exact details. Right?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's definitely improving. And I think, the IP question is really an interesting one, because like you look at like open source in software, and I mean open source has been one of the sort of greatest windfalls to human society, because like rather than having these closed systems, we're able to leverage each other's knowledge and build on it, which creates a much more creative world. IP is interesting because it's very protectionist, which means that like it almost holds civilization back. And I think to fully embrace like the benefits of AI, we also have to embrace open source and embrace the creativity that comes with it. So I think there's definitely lots of questions there on the IP side of things, but like I think if we look at software engineering as an example, I think like we've actually seen tremendous benefits from allowing people to use these things, and finding ways to monetize our creations in new ways. And I think there's lots of opportunities to do that with new technology.
And I think that's a big culture difference too, of two very different industries.
Yes.
Right? Where open source has long been a really positive force in the software industry. Whereas if you're an artist and like, say you're Miyazaki and like running Studio Ghibli, and you have built your entire life's work on a very specific style, and the way copyright law has been around for years has been surrounding like protecting that type of style. It makes like, and also I think what tech people underestimate with the creative space is how challenging it is to break into the field makes it that much more personal and emotional.
Yeah.
Because people will spend years to decades creating, inventing a style.
Yeah.
And whereas in software things move much faster.
Yeah.
And even if you do end up creating a style in software, it doesn't, like, you can get your first job in software usually like within a year or two of you graduating from school. But for a lot of artists trying to break into studios, it can take over a decade to get your first job. And so I think that is one of the reasons why the emotions from the creative space are just that much more intense.
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense. But what I think the big underestimations from these communities is a few things. First, I think there seems to be a narrative that people in AI want to basically get rid of artists, which couldn't be further from the truth. The idea is, how can we empower more people to create things?
Totally.
Right? But the other assumption is that, oh, why are these tech people only building tools that do what we do? Yeah. Like, why can't we build AI systems that do my taxes for us? I don't want to do taxes. And it's like, no, like, that's the much bigger moneymaker is like taking care of admin tasks, and all of these things are being built. So I think there's a massive narrative issue when it comes from the tech community and talking about this. And I think the other thing that, again, this is why I keep repeating this over and over and over again, like yelling into the void and hoping that somebody hears me, is like, you don't need studios anymore. You don't need to spend 10 years trying to break into Warner Brothers.
You can do it yourself.
Or Disney. You can now grab all of your really talented friends who you would love to work with and build your own studio.
Yeah. Well, because now it becomes about storytelling more than it is about just like, can you craft the art itself? And I think that that's like, not that storytelling hasn't always been, it's sort of like with startups, like it's always been about distribution, but now it's especially about distribution, and it's always been about storytelling, and now it's especially about storytelling.
Well, especially when it comes to Hollywood in particular, the studio system, first of all, has been falling apart for the last 20 years, which I think a lot of people outside of Hollywood don't necessarily recognize. Like, they've been doing everything they can to be as relevant as possible, and because of that, they just copy and paste the same formulas over and over again. And so artists who want to make these incredibly innovative new stories, it's been an absolute nightmare trying to get anything frankly good made other than Marvel, just like Star Wars, right?
Yeah, well, and distribution is so much easier too, right? It's like, you look at now and you have like YouTube and all the social channels and like all these places where you could just distribute your product yourself. Like, you don't have to like push it through the studios anymore. So, I mean, for the last like decade, I think we've seen, you know, this sort of rise of the creator and so on. And like, I think there's plenty of artists that have made this transition. I think like, this is why I touched on like, learn the tools, you know, is because like, it's really important that you learn the new tools. Like, if you're an artist and you paint, that's great. There's not a lot of demand for paint in the modern world, but there's a ton of demand for people that could paint with Photoshop, right? And like, there's like so much demand for it. And so like, if you just shift your focus from like, if you just see yourself as a creative broadly and don't isolate yourself into like, or back yourself into a corner and say, well, like, I can only create with a paintbrush, there's tons of opportunity for you. And I think that same thing goes, even if you spent 20 years crafting a style, well, be a better storyteller and produce more content, build a following, and sort
and in
of,
the arts, like, you're encouraged to move faster and like create more like output, like having a higher amount of output is generally better than focusing on like one piece.
Yeah,
and, like,
it's like Michelangelo versus Da Vinci, right?
And
it's like
so,
Michelangelo did like 1,000
It's just so
works.
goofy because I think there's just so much fear, and I think a lot of it is because of not people making the art themselves, and whether these tools like allow people to make the art themselves. I think it's really fear about these businesses and industries with these people who have a lot of money who've been calling the shots, and I think people just haven't been able to see past that yet. And it's interesting because the creators, like social media creators, are like super in, but it's like the people who've been trying to do the established path are the ones who are the angriest.
Totally.
And so I'm hoping I don't know if that's going to be me who's like keeps yelling about this on a daily basis. And I know we got to get to the next question, but this is part of the reason why I have been so aggressive on pushing this narrative over and over again, because like there are so many things that are possible, and I just like I do like, don't be Luddites, don't be Luddites.
Totally, don't be Luddites. And to quote Dune, fear is the mind killer. So,
ooh,
you know,
a Dune reference. My goodness. Okay, well, we need to get to the next question. So AI has been moving so fast. All right, like we're talking about entire industries who are like, everybody's going belly up. Nobody knows what's going on. And I personally discovered this when working for Datavolo. You know, we were a Series A startup with 22 million in funding. We had 2 years of runway. Like, we were good. I thought I was set to have a job for at least a year, if not 2.
Yeah.
And then we sold in 4 months,
Totally.
right? Everything has been moving just so fast. And I was wondering what you think are going to be the biggest changes in the startup and the financial world thanks to AI. Are we ever slowing down? Is this just normal now? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question, because I think on the one hand, like in the near term, we're going to see things moving so fast. I mean, the fact that you could just build a company or a software product overnight and then basically sell that thing. Like, if you're like deeply networked in an industry and you could build your product and sell it to all the people you know, well, you have this rapid rise of companies, right? Like, where you could just like overnight be selling $10 million worth of your product. And so like, I think we end up having these market cycles that are really fast. Then like, but just as quickly as you built that product, someone else could come in with a better solution and essentially sell to the same customers, because like there's less brand loyalty today than there used to be. And if you have two friends that are both building products, you're kind of like, well, now I kind of just have to go with whatever meets my needs the most. And especially like you look at how the technology is changing, where like I could basically just come in as a company, and the normal sales cycle might look like this. I want to purchase your product. Oh, but I need to have this feature. And right now you're like, okay, well, we'll put that on the roadmap. It might be 6 months or something before you have that feature. Well, in a post-AI world, it's like, well, okay, I'll have that feature for you tomorrow. Yeah. And then you might say, well, like, oh, well, that's great that you could build that feature, but I have to retrain my 10,000 person workforce to use your platform. And it's like, well, no, you don't have to do that. By tomorrow, I'll build an interface that looks exactly like the one you're using.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and so then they're like, oh, well, great, I guess that's cool, but I guess the final problem is like, I have 20 years of data in Salesforce. Like, how do I deal with that? I can't use your product because of that. And then you might say, well, no. I'll build something that pulls all the data out of your system, puts it in our system, and you know what? This product is half the cost of what you're spending right now. And as a business, you're like, okay, cool. Like, great, I'll jump on that in a second. And now you're buying from them. And so that cycle keeps repeating itself, where it's like you could just switch, like the switching cost goes to 0, which means that you could change immediately, right? Like, as soon as you have an idea to change to a different tool, you could literally change to that other tool. So that creates really fast market cycles where companies spring up, they're doing really great, and then also competitors spring up, and then now you're sort of wondering how you're going to keep your company alive. And I think that like there's sort of like a really interesting parallel in like the crypto markets, because cryptos were like extreme open source, where like the last market cycle was built primarily on the Ethereum chain, and you could literally just go onto the Ethereum chain and see the source code of anyone's product. And so that created this really interesting dynamic where like these companies would just spring up overnight and be, competitive like immediately. Yeah. And the most famous one in this is there was this company Uniswap that did a decentralized exchange, and that basically means that you could exchange one currency for another. So that might be like in the mainstream financial markets, that might be like I'm trading like USD for euros or something like that. And so Uniswap had this open source code base. You could look at it, you could read it, which is important in crypto because people want to know that they can trust what they're operating with. And there's a second company, SushiSwap, that basically they call it forking. You basically take the code and you just copy paste it into your own code base, and then you run with it. And so SushiSwap sprung up overnight with a literal identical copy of the code base, and they just they just created different financial incentives. So they like found a new interesting way to incentivize people to use SushiSwap instead of Uniswap. And they started pulling market share from Uniswap, and then they ended up becoming like a serious competitor. I mean, like they were like the two biggest exchanges in the space. And so I think that that's the type of thing we should expect with AI, is that like if software becomes commoditized, like people could just build these things overnight, and it's like it all becomes about like how fast can you sell it, how do you create new and interesting incentive structures to get people to use your product. And I think that that's really more of what we're going to see, is like just rapid rise, rapid fall.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least for now, right? Because I do think that you do achieve some sort of stabilized state over time. We just don't know how long that lasts, right? I mean, how long the chaos lasts, I guess. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? But it's going to be the near term sort of future at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I've been worried about, I think, is we are going to have some chaos. It is going to be a little crazy for a while. And the question is, how can we upskill people as quickly as possible so that like the outcomes are not going to be as bad? And that's what gets me really nervous about having a recession right now, is it's not just like AI technology major changes. It's like there's so much more instability that could lead this to being worse than it should be, right?
Totally.
I would love to just be really, really thoughtful about this and make sure that this like transition ends up going super well.
I mean, the near-term future is definitely going to the people who are willing to spend their spare time learning new skills, right? Because like as things change really fast, that means that you have to adapt. And so we at least have the tools today, right? I mean, we talked about the Luddites. We at least have, like, you could basically learn anything on YouTube. I mean, whether it's fixing a car or learning to program, or like, I don't know, like remodeling your house, like the list goes on.
People think it's harder to learn these tools than they are, because if you look at how old software tools worked, a lot of them were really challenging or annoying, or like, what is this? And now you can basically ask a chatbot, hey, how does this work? And like I feel like the designs are just the design of products has just become that much more intuitive, which is good, is good news. But I mean, even literally last night, I was worried about my garden. You know, we moved to a new home. I have a brand new garden, and it's bigger than anything I've ever had before. And I've been nervous about destroying it. Like I've just been nervous about like not doing it right. And I went on ChatGPT, and after like 30 minutes, I was like, oh, actually, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Because I asked ChatGPT, like, I like took all these photos, and I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, oh, here's your schedule for how you should take care of your garden for the next year. And it's like,
oh, you're nitrogen deficient. Like, you're like, whoa, really? Like, am I?
And so that's the thing, is like, even though I know it's gardening and it's not, learning a new tool, but I went from being like really stressed out about this for like weeks to honestly feeling like way better in like a 30-minute period. And I had been asking people in my life like advice for things, and they're like, oh yeah, you really need to spend a lot of time like learning the garden and doing all, and they were kind of like freaking me out, and nobody had like actually made me feel better about it. And ChatGPT was just like, these are all the things to keep an eye out for. You operate on this schedule and everything's gonna be good. And so I think I think maybe people understanding that like the tools are just like becoming that much easier to use.
They are going to be that much easier to use, and like it's only going to become easier and easier. And I mean, I think you absolutely can learn something today that feels out of reach, or has traditionally felt out of reach.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be right back after a word from our sponsor. This show has been brought to you by Cirrus North. Does your organization need a better partner for cloud, DevOps, security, and compliance? Cirrus North is a team of software professionals with a passion for cloud solutions, DevOps, automation, Kubernetes, and streamlining complex business problems. They are 100% US-based in Minnesota and Chicago, have deep experience supporting mission-critical technology operations in highly regulated environments, and have delivered success for startups and for companies on the Fortune 5. Interested? Reach out to the team at cirrusnorth.io. That's cirrusnorth.io. Thanks, Cirrus North. Welcome back, everybody. So, Ryan, right now, it seems to me that the majority of the most financially successful AI startups right now are in the B2B space, right? They're businesses selling to other businesses and not necessarily in the consumer space.
Yeah.
What do you think it's going to take, other than, ChatGPT, which of course a lot of consumers are using and are using in record numbers and whatnot, although still like a very large amount of the population hasn't even touched it yet, which is kind of wild to think about.
Totally.
What do you think it's going to take in order for consumers to really start using AI tools?
Yeah, the thing to note about consumer products in general is that they're only really adopted when you could create a fully seamless experience, right? It has to integrate into our lives so just like beautifully and easily that you don't have to think about using it. I think, one of the greatest product people of all time, like or hate the person, was Steve Jobs, right?
Steve Jobs, yeah.
and he had this idea that like the personal computer was the bicycle for the mind. And the bicycle was created in like 1817. Before that, we either like walked or we rode horses, right? But then, and horses are expensive, right? Like not everybody could afford a horse. And a bicycle opened up the door for people to be able to just get out and go incredible distances in a day. And so he sort of viewed the computer through this abstraction of the bicycle. And that, you think about the bicycle and how seamless it is, how easy it is just to hop on and ride and accomplish all of these incredible sort of things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. And that's how he viewed it. And so he wanted this to be so seamless that like it just is an extension of like your hand or an extension of your mind. And that drove a whole wave of consumer products that, you look at the iPhone, this was brilliant. It's not that people hadn't tried some sort of smart device before, but somehow he was able to create something that just functioned so smoothly. And I think the same thing has to go for the modern consumer products. Like ChatGPT is clunky. Like having to get on there and, type, and then get a response and be like, oh, actually what I really meant was this. And that's really, really slow. And you also have to be tied to your phone to achieve it. And so I think for us to start seeing some of these new consumer products, and something that's also important to note is we are already using AI in all of our consumer products. Like we have AI fully integrated into Facebook and Snapchat, and we just don't think of it as consumers.
Well, it is technically a different form of AI. Like it's more machine learning rather than generative AI.
Sure, definitely, and I think there's some nuances, but when you're at like Facebook scale and you can invest $1 billion, like they were able to get their machine learning models to get pretty close, right, to what's happening right now. But there's definitely no doubt a bunch of new innovations that are possible. But you're absolutely right. Like there is a difference between the machine learning stuff and the generative stuff that's happening today. And I think for us to like really start to capitalize on these technologies, we need a new form factor. We need the iPhone of the modern world. And I think that as long as we have to hold our phone up to interact with something and sort of, use our thumbs to type and so on, we're going to be stuck in the current state of things. And so that kind of leads us to augmented reality and virtual reality and, or AR or VR. And AR is kind of this idea that you can overlay things on your environment and go about your day.
So by AR, typically the way I like to describe it is, say you're using your cell phone and I use the example of trying to tidy my garden, right? And I point my phone over at my garden, being able to click on my phone and say, like, what would it look like if I had a hydrangea bush here?
Totally.
And then being able to look at the photo and be like, oh, I could add a hydrangea bush here. Let me move it over here.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Exactly. And that's augmented reality. And then there's virtual reality or VR, which is this idea that's like a fully immersive experience. Yeah. It's like you aren't seeing the present world, you're seeing the generated world.
And that's the goggles where you've got them on. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we need that technology to advance further for us to fully capture the value of these generative AI tools, because if I'm going about my life, I can't just like constantly be pulling my phone out of my pocket or like, oh, where did I put that thing? Like, it needs to be integrated. It needs to be seamless, because that's how you create great consumer products. And so with augmented reality specifically, like the couple of the best examples are like, imagine an AR like Google Maps. Mm-hmm. And so glasses, I think, are probably the form factor that everyone's really focused on right now, whether it ends up being glasses or something like that. It's a wearable of some type. It has a different interface for us to control it. But let's just say it's glasses. I think it's like the easiest one to visualize. And you have Google Maps and you're wearing glasses and you're going about your day. Well, it's like, as you're like walking down the road, you might have, something that pops up and points at a restaurant. And it's like, hey, this is that restaurant I was telling you about that I think you should go to. They have this item that would be fantastic that I think you're really going to enjoy. You like spicy food. This is like just the right amount of spicy. And you're going about and like it's telling you, like showing an overlay over, say, the ground that's like, you need to turn right here to go to your destination. And you have like different alerts that might be coming up, right? Where it's like, okay, like I know that you're about to go to your friend's house. Well, they just texted you to let you know that they're going to be 5 minutes late. You should just wait a second. And it's like, oh, well, being that you have 5 seconds, here's like this recommendation for you to, or 5 minutes. Here's this recommendation of something you could do in the meantime. There's this really cool piece of art on your way there. Maybe just stop there and look at it for 5 minutes. And that's fully integrated into your experience.
I think it's interesting that you're suggesting that augmented reality and like finding like more physical objects to make it an easier access point for using AI is really interesting. It really ties together one of the previous guests that I've had on my show. I don't know if you remember this episode, was with Darren Culbreath, who used to be like a hotshot AI guy at Google. Now he's a hotshot AI guy at HCL Tech. So different organization, but I always bring up the Google because, a little bit more name recognition. Yeah. And at the very end of that episode, he started talking about how what he was most excited for was ambient AI. And that basically AI that, there's maybe always something that's kind of listening or kind of around. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, hey, on your groceries list, you mentioned that you wanted bananas, but that's the only thing you don't have in your cart.
Totally.
And, or like, again, like, oh, there was that really cool restaurant that you have on your list. Like, it's over there. Do you want to go do that? Or like, even better, you're out with your friends and you're like, hey, what restaurant should we go to? And you're like, oh, I don't know. And then having the AI be like, these are restaurants you've talked about recently. Yeah. And this one is like just a few blocks away, right? Being able to find those types of like magic opportunities. Yeah. I think where I get worried about that kind of ambient technology, and it's the same thing I kind of worry about with like the wearables, is like, oh, do I want, like, you run into the issues of like consent and data, which is the same thing that we were talking about earlier with the Google Glass, where people were like, oh, I don't feel like I want to be filmed, but at the same time people are running around TikToking things on their phones every gosh darn day. So are we already at that point? Like, is there actually a difference between like the phones and like having a device like this? It's a great question. That like there's definitely the cultural side of things, right, that I think we tend to forget about as technologists. We're like, oh yeah, like this technology is going to be ready tomorrow, but like great, what does it take to shift people's mindset to accept it? And I think with the ambient AI stuff, like it's not just about like what sort of context awareness does it have about your life. It's like the best way, there's a really cool abstraction to view these generative AI tools through, which is like,
what they are really good at more than anything is taking unstructured data and turning it into something that's structured. And you look at like the world is like the final frontier of unstructured data, right? It's like everything that you interact with is unstructured. Like, where is the location of this thing? Well, it's like it could change, right? Like, and like I don't actually know where that's at as a computer. I can't like create a 3D model of all of this stuff and point you to that spot. And so I think that's actually really cool. And that's the combination of like this ambient technology. It kind of blends with personalization, and then kind of blends with sort of like an interface for us to actually like interact with, which I think ends up taking the form of this device, right? And maybe glasses, maybe they're playing with different controls that use the electrical impulses in your wrist and things like that.
Okay, now we're talking about electrical impulses in the wrist. I think we need to jump into the next topic. I think we've reached that point. Do you think we've reached that point?
Yeah, we reached that point. I think there's some cool stuff in VR definitely that like we could go over too. But I mean, we don't have 10 hours to talk. I mean, well, we do.
But oh my gosh. Okay, so guys, the reason why I'm jumping on this is because our next topic is really juicy. It's really fun. It's actually so fun that a couple months ago I hosted a party that was a PowerPoint party. So a party where people could essentially give presentations on something that they were really passionate or enthusiastic about. And so almost everybody, made a slideshow. Brian here, a bit lazy, didn't make a slideshow. We were all very disappointed in that. But what he did was ended up being something a lot better, which is really fun. So he decided to do a fireside chat, and it was like one of the weirdly most mesmerizing experiences I've had. And I think it was just it was the last presentation. We had all of these things. Some of the people had left the room, so it was a slightly more intimate group. We turned off the TV, so we weren't doing any more slideshows.
Dim the lights, like it was
we didn't dim the lights. We kind of like felt like that in the moment, and then like you had the microphone, and we all just kind of like slowly started leaning in, like what is he saying? So I just wanted to ask you about the topic of that conversation, which was about Cybersapiens. So I think the official question here is, can you tell us more for the audience here at Swift Start Go about what on earth Cybersapiens are, and like, can we like try to recreate this moment right now?
Yeah. I mean, do we have like do you have a microphone? I've picked this up. Like,
I mean, we could probably pick this up and just be like, "Hello, everyone. Welcome to the future," if we want. But I think your mic is maybe a little bit more sensitive than mine. But honestly, that's why I wanted to record on the couch. Was like, I want to have this fireside chat.
Yeah.
About Cybersapiens and like.
Totally.
Like, what on earth is going on in your mind, man?
Yeah. So Cybersapiens is kind of this thought experiment that I've been running with a couple people that I talk about some of like these future technologies with, and it's basically this idea that like historically we've sort of viewed our place in the world as this dominant place where we look at Darwinism and sort of like humans dominating over the environment and dominating over other animals and so on and so forth, which like made a lot of sense for the time period on why you might view things this way. It's like we were like, spreading out across the world, exploring these new places. Ship technology had improved, so we were able to like get across oceans, and we stopped starving at the rate that we were because we had more food security. And so there's like all these trends that pointed us towards like this being our understanding of like what our place was in the world. And there was this scientist, Lynn Margulis, in like the 1960s, who presented this alternative view to humanity and what our place is. And she said that life is actually a product of cooperation rather than competition. And if you look at our evolution, it's actually how do we find the best way to cooperate? And that usually produces success in species. And those species tend to, in the Darwin terms, like win out over the other species. The greatest example of this is like prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, right? Mm-hmm. If you go back to sort of like the genesis of this foundational building block, a eukaryotic cell, which is what all life is built on, whether it's plants or humans or like it's basically that. It's that combination of both a cell that can execute commands and a power plant that can power that cell. And these were actually two different organisms. It's the prokaryotic cell and then this bacteria.
Yeah.
And they ended up merging together, and then the rest is history, right? We have life as we know it. And so this is two things working together, cooperating to create something stronger. And the eukaryotic cell basically outcompeted, all the other life forms at that time, and acted as this building block, like I said. And so that's like one really cool example of this. I mean, a really fun example is dogs and humans. About 40,000 years ago, so they think we had this bond with dogs, where now we started living together and protecting each other and helping each other survive. And dogs are great for hunting, and we're pretty good at keeping them safe and ensuring that they're able to eat when maybe hunting is a little more scarce. And I think that's like another beautiful example of two species working so well together. And dogs were very helpful for our development as humans. And so I think that cooperation, I think, is something that we're going to continue to see as we step forward with AI, because I think the foundation of Cybersapiens then is built on this idea that the next piece of technology that's going to be really important for our evolution is our ability to integrate more closely with our technology. And right now what that's looking like is probably something like a neural implant. They're calling these like neural brain interfaces.
Yeah.
And it's this idea that we could overlay our brain and with something that could detect the electrical signals. And then we could control, say, a device with our brains, and that gets more advanced as time goes on, obviously, where we could outsource memories and things like that, and actually like reduce the latency, the time it takes from brain to processor, down to very close to zero. And so these neural brain interfaces, they're essentially going to unlock another phase of evolution for us, because it gives us the ability to do those things that I described. And imagine, if I were recording every second of my life and I could recall that with perfect fidelity. That's amazing, right? Like, that's incredible. And it happens just as fast as my memory, maybe faster. Sometimes you have to kind of like think a little bit to find what you're looking for. But having the ability to do that, to be able to say, read a book and remember every word of that book. Like, this is all very powerful, and like it turns us into sort of something that's a whole heck of a lot smarter than we are today. And so that kind of ability to do that, like, obviously right now we have the internet. If we just plug ourselves directly into the internet, what that looks like, I think, is sort of like a collective consciousness where we all have the same information and we're accessing it all. But like humans are built on individualism. It's something we really pride ourselves on.
Yeah.
And so we probably end up building private clouds as well, where we store like our personal memories and our experiences and like the particular content we want to be able to recall really, really quickly. That's really important to us. Maybe specialized knowledge for stuff that we do. And so you have private cloud, you have the internet, and there are these two ways that we're going to be extracting information. And that kind of foundation really forces us to have to ask some existential questions about like what it means to be human, and what it means to be alive, right? Because we have this cooperation and this coming together of two different entities that looks a lot like, the eukaryotic cell, where now all of this stuff becomes possible. So there's this paradox, and it's called Theseus's paradox. And this is, I think, one of the critical questions that we are also going to have to ask ourselves. And Theseus's paradox goes like this. If you have a ship and you have one board that needs to be replaced, so you pull that board off and you replace it, is it the same ship? And I would argue, yeah, it's the same ship. We just changed out one board. Well, now I change out a second board. Still seems like the same ship. A third board, it still seems like the same ship. Well, if I replace the mast and if I replace the railings, well, it still seems like the same ship. It's the same shape. It operates the same, so on and so forth. Well, once I've one by one replaced every board on the ship, the same question stands, right? Is it the same ship? And I think it is. It feels like the same ship. There's never a point in time where you're like, I think this is the board, Yeah. And if that is the case and it's not the same ship, then at what point is it? Is it board 1? Is it board 50? And I think that's the interesting paradox for this, because Cybersapiens forces us to think about the same paradox for ourselves. It's like we reach this state where we outsource, say, our memories. And it's like, okay, well, I've recorded all my memories. They're more accessible in the cloud than they are in my brain because I have a small, memory relative to, computers. And if I'm storing all my memories there, then I'm also able to store algorithms there that can help me filter through those memories. And then I'm also able to, just insert books into my memory as I see fit, and different training documents. And now I could access those. There's day one where we plug into, say, a neural interface. And then there's, day 2 and day 3 and day 4 as we slowly start to store more information there, access more information there. And the question becomes, at what point do we become the eukaryotic cell? At what point are we a cybersapien instead of a homo sapien? And I think that's a really, it's a really sort of interesting philosophical question that we're going to have to continue to ask ourselves. But so much becomes possible, right? Once you have the ability to do that, because it's not just about my lifespan and what I store there. It's about what other stuff happens now, because we have the ability to multi-thread. Multi-threading is basically this idea that you could do two processes at the exact same time. So it's kind of like if I sat two people down at a table together and I said, person A, you do this, person B, you do that. Well, they come back with a result as soon as they finish. And I'm basically able to get twice as much work done. Well, the same thing happens once we're connected to these devices. We could be orchestrating different processes that happen in the background, multi-threading, instead of what we do right now, which is single threading. Even if we think we're multitasking, what we're actually doing is task switching. So we spend a second on this task and a second on that task. I'm writing my paper, I'm listening to my podcast. You can't both write the paper and listen to the podcast at the same time. You sort of just jump back and forth and you switch your context. And that appears as if you're multitasking. In this case, you're actually going to be able to truly multitask. I'm literally doing 2 things, 10 things, 1,000 things potentially at once. And if I am doing 1,000 things at once, how long does it take for me to have more experiences that happened in my cloud consciousness than that happened in my physical body? Because my physical body is single threaded. And so that poses another question too. It's at what point do we make that transition when I could do 1,000 things at once there? And this, you could sort of play this thought experiment out really far, right? You could keep going further and further and further down the line. Where it's well, now if I can multi-thread, what about multi-body existence, right? Could I exist in multiple bodies at the same time? A video camera, say, is a type of body, right? As is a robot. And then you could play it out even farther, and you could say, well, if I could exist in multiple bodies, what happens if I travel far apart from each other? Well, now there's like the time it takes for that data to move from one system to another, which means I'm actually not experiencing time at the same moment. I'm actually experiencing what we could call asynchronous consciousness, which is this idea that now, like, this experience is something, it takes 6 minutes to get back to the main source. So I'm having two experiences on two different timelines. And so, yeah, you could kind of keep playing this out with our knowledge of technology and what we know about how some of this stuff is going to work. I think there's a lot of really interesting philosophical questions that we as humans are going to have to answer over the next couple decades. And I think it's important to note, like, some of this may sound scary, but you imagine a world without the eukaryotic cell, and you say to yourself, like, well, the world wouldn't be very beautiful because it would be barren and it would just be a bunch of prokaryotic cells floating around in water. And so there's actually this kind of like beautiful future for us where it's like, because this technology is possible, it creates this complexity that we can't even fathom today. And we don't know what sort of like new and beautiful things become possible once that future exists. So it's one thing to be afraid because we don't understand it, but I think if we just look back at history and we sort of imagine a world without the eukaryotic cell, I think we start to understand that, like, these trends tend to move in ways that create additional complexity, and that complexity could be quite beautiful. And in fact, historically up to this point, has worked out pretty well.
Well, thank you for taking us on this mind experiment, Brian. Yeah. And as I was listening towards the end, and thinking about what are the infinite possibilities of consciousness, which definitely spooks me a little bit. And then you're talking about the eukaryotic cell. I couldn't help but notice your t-shirt, and I thought maybe you should share with the audience that even if that is the future, we must never forget.
Never forget. Let's
never
not forget where we came from.
The tech that we came from. Oh my gosh. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Me on. I appreciate it. It's been so much fun.
I'm gonna
go from super fan to making it on camera.
You did it. You achieved like full consciousness like while on the show. This is amazing. All right, and I know you said you didn't want to bother plugging Communiful, so I'm going to. So Communiful is a really fantastic networking group right here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. It's really, really fantastic. There are all sorts of different types of groups that meet up multiple times a month. There's a startup one, marketing and sales, tech and AI, all of these different types of events and specialized events and even big events that go on throughout the year, like a holiday party and most recently my birthday party. So Brian and his wife Haley run the group. It's absolutely fantastic. So if you have not checked them out, definitely check them out at www.communiful.com.
Joincommuniful.com. Yeah.
www.joincommuniful.com. So thank you so much again, Brian, for coming here. This was an absolute blast. And thank you, everybody, so much for watching. If you liked this show, please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're watching, whether it's on YouTube or wherever it is that you follow your podcasts. We have new shows that come out every single Monday with different guests who are phenomenal, like Brian. And if you too want to be a super fan like Brian, please let us know what your thoughts are. Please write a comment or send us a note. We would love to hear from you because lately it's just Brian. And also my friend Ashley in Spain. Hi, Ashley. I love and appreciate you too. So thank you so much again, everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic day and take a moment to think, what is the future going to look like? Are you going to be a Luddite? Or are you going to be a Cybersapien? I hope those aren't the only two options. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye. This show has been brought to you by Cirrus North. Does your organization need a better partner for cloud, DevOps, security, and compliance? Cirrus North is a team of software professionals with a passion for cloud solutions, DevOps, automation, Kubernetes, and streamlining complex business problems. They are 100% US-based in Minnesota and Chicago, have deep experience supporting mission-critical technology operations in highly regulated environments, and have delivered success for startups and for companies on the Fortune 5. Interested? Reach out to the team at cirrusnorth.io. That's cirrusnorth.io. Thanks, Cirrus North.